IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of All Things Policy. Today we have with us Pranay and Mr. Arni. We are going to discuss about events that are happening within our western neighbor, that is Pakistan. A protest is currently on. All the opposition parties are coming together and protesting against General Bajwa and Imran Khan. So welcome guys. And I would like to start with Pranay. So Pranay, what is happening in Pakistan? Why are all political parties coming together? What are the issues on which protests are happening right now with our western neighbors?
Thanks, Suyash. So there are many strands to why this is happening and why this is happening now. But let me just start first with the structural issues. So it has been long accused that Imran Khan was propped up by the army and the military jihadi complex, and that's why his electoral victory was completely rigged. So this is long known, and Nawaz Sharif was ousted out of his ousted and then he went to London, and he is living there currently. So there were a lot of these issues in which there is an unsaid martial law kind of in place, and all political parties have been restricted, and a selected ruler called Imran Khan has been put in place. This was the word used by Nawaz Sharif also on his rally speech, Gujranwala, which he spoke to this, right? So that there is this selected democracy which is in place. Now, these were things which were ongoing, but on the other hand, of late, there has been a lot of inflation in Pakistan. COVID-19 also has impacted the economy. So there are a lot of these other constraints also which are growing. So there is a forum for all opposition parties who are coming together and trying to raise their voice against it. Now, what is new in this is that this is perhaps the first time that a leader who has a mass following, that too in Punjab, where Pakistan army also has its major base from, someone of that stature is directly taking on the army. That is something new. And I went through Nawaz Sharif's speech yesterday, where he addressed over Zoom, obviously because he's in London, to this People's Democratic Movement rally in Gujranwala, and it was a conference rather, and he spoke about how the state in a state is now becoming a state above the state. So and he clearly said that this is not just against Imran Khan, it is against the people who have put Imran Khan in power. So this is what is happening, and 11 political parties have come together, including PPP and PMLN, which were the big parties in Pakistan. So they have come together to raise voice against Imran Khan and the army as well. So that's probably what's happening.
Mr. Arni,
Yeah.
would you like to continue?
Just to add some historical context, I mean, the sort of a movement for democracy, what we have now is a PDM. The roots of it was actually in the MRD movement in the late 70s, when Benazir Bhutto took to the streets to bring, with the support of the same man who was around, Fazlur Rahman. Fazlur Rahman was the Joint Secretary of the MRD at that time, and he has fought. His credentials are fairly good on this sort of a thing. Now, this is the second time that sort of a movement has taken place, and the first time around, it wasn't aimed against the army; it was aimed against one man, Zia. This time around, it's a similar sort of a context. It's not aimed against they haven't articulated a demand against the Pakistan army. They've only focused on Bajwa and a few of the people around him. The few They put 4 5 names have come in so far. In the first instance, Nawaz Sharif said that his government was toppled earlier by Bajwa, supported by the then DGISI, Zahirul Islam, and also by the then DGISPR, Asim Bajwa, and a fourth name given was, of course, the current DGISI, Faiz Hamid Chowdhury. Then, of course, he brought. This is what he said. These are the troika. These are the 4 people who toppled him, and those who brought Imran Khan in. He identified the selectors. He identified as Faiz Ahmad and Bajwa. Why I said this about the other 4 is largely for one reason. Imran Khan's government has, though the other Bajwa, the DGISPR, had retired, he was brought back as special assistant for information and broadcasting, a sort of a backstopping for the PMLN, Imran Khan's own information and broadcasting minister. So Bajwa, whom we saw as his nemesis, is back, and I think the first casualty has really been Bajwa. We still don't know how. I'm talking about the other Bajwa, the DGISPR. We don't really know whether all interconnected, but obviously there is some connections here. One last point I'd say before going back is Nawaz is a man who has a long memory. He's not going to forget things in a hurry. The way his wife was treated shabbily, and he was also treated shabbily when his wife was dying, is memories that he'll have. He will also remember that in one of the jalsas earlier, couple of years ago, his wife Kulsum was in a car which was going towards a venue of a thing or something. That car had blocked the way or whatever. It stopped. That car was lifted up in the air. I think they used some sort of a crane or something. She refused to get out of the car, and it was left. She was left dangling in the air for 2 hours. So these are memories that Nawaz has in his mind. I mean, Nawaz is a family man. He won't forget in a hurry.
Just to add to this, Mr. Arni, I think one new thing that I found was based on the speech that Nawaz Sharif gave. He clearly mentions about how the 1973 Constitution talks about Article 6, which is meant to restrict the roles of the generals. So he specifically mentions generals, and the fact that that is not being implemented at all, and generals are sort of still having a say. So that was sort of, I thought, a direct attack, and he sort of trying to take on some people in the army more directly rather than what was happening previously. So do you see something in that?
Not particularly. He did something like this with Jahangir Karamat also. When Jahangir Karamat spoke about having a national security council, with the army dominating it and the army's views taken on board. I mean, the army would articulate its position on various issues through the NSA, through the National Security Council. He got rid of Jahangir Karamat. He doesn't like interference in his when he's the minister, when he's the prime minister. Yeah, okay, but targeting the army as an institution rather, and apart from targeting individuals, is a different thing. I agree with you there.
That's fascinating insight, sir. I would also like to add something to this and ask you guys: is there an along with economic angle? Is there also an angle on civil liberties being taken away? For example, Nawaz Sharif's brother has been put into jail for some time. I'm not sure whether he's out on bail or not. So, what are the situations regarding civil liberties on ground in Pakistan right now, especially related to opposition?
Putting an opposition leader in jail on various issues is not that doesn't become a major issue in Pakistan. It's there. You must remember they had Bhutto behind bars for years and then killed him eventually, executed him eventually. So it's there, but there is a public consciousness about these aspects, but it doesn't become an issue. It's never really become too much of an issue unless the politicians themselves take to the streets and do it. Yeah, but on what you said, yes, the crunch will really be the economy, not so much these movements, and these movements just add fuel to the fire. The crunch is what Pakistan faces in the future, or maybe we can discuss that a little later.
Uh, to add to this, one thing, Mr. Arni, and I wanted to get your opinion also on this. I feel that in India, for example, a lot of the commentary is trying to project this as the civil democracy in Pakistan resisting the army, and a new thing coming up. But what I feel is it is more like the rumblings within the military jihadi complex itself. For example, it's not as if Nawaz Sharif is completely independent of the military and it hasn't benefited, right? In fact, the Islami Jamhuri Ittihad, the IGI, which was formed earlier in 1989, was a brainchild of Hamid Gul itself, right? So, what it looks as if is that there is support for this type of formation within the army and within the system as well, within the deep state as well, and that's why all these things are happening. Otherwise, I can't imagine a Zoom call being arranged where he's taking on the entire army and people are not blocking that. I mean, this is the Pakistan which actually censors out TV channels very quickly, right? So all that happens, and given that this has already happened means that there are either people within opposing Bajwa or Imran Khan, and that is playing out here. What do you think?
Just before Mr. Rani, just before you add, is it something related to Mr. Bajwa continuing on the position for a very long time, creating disturbances within this upper circle of military echelon? Is it something to do with that?
I'm not. I don't think there's much. We should put much in stake by discordance within the army ranks. They will not. No matter there may be people who would be comfortable with Bajwa stepping down, but they will not countenance a movement forcing their army chief out. That's not. That's not a proposition. That's not something that can be done. As for Zoom call, I think it's technology has reached such a stage that it's really. I don't think it was permitted to happen. If that is the thing, I don't think the army or anybody could do much about it. Yes, they could have probably disconnected internet in those areas, but there are so many fallback positions, so many ways you can do all this. Maybe they even have had a recording press. This thing, all this could have.
But it was allowed to be broadcast on TV as well. And Imran Khan allowed it to be broadcast. So how does that happen?
That is a little difficult to understand why Imran did it, but I don't know. I really have no answer. But I don't think it's so much as a cracks within the army. Yes, last year when Fazlur and gang brought their jalsa to Islamabad, I felt, yes, we had some information that there are four generals who were not entirely comfortable, Bajwa. And these four generals, with a lot, if there are four who have come out in the open, there are very many in the a list of corps commanders who would probably be equally supportive. The Pakistan army, unlike, is actually much more democratic than the surrounding structures that they try and pull down. They work on a consensus platform. Whatever's decided in the corps commanders meeting is implemented, and at the corps commanders meeting, it's a very frank exchange of views. You could oppose whatever is being the army chief is saying, and it's not frowned upon. The only thing that's frowned upon is once a consensus is arrived at, you do not try and muddy the waters. So, which is why there is a sort of a continuity proposition. I mean, if a new army chief comes in, he continues the policies of his predecessor, because for him to consolidate his own position among the corps commanders takes about a year. And then you find that 1 year could stretch. By the time he gets his own favorites in and creates a sort of a thing, it's a little too late for him. When you have a situation where you grant an extension, the extension creates a lot of turbulence within the system. One is that you are denying the chances of others. There are favorites who have already positioned themselves and you really push them out. Then you have a larger time to mess around with the core commanders so that it's your picture that gets, it's your view that is articulated. So in that system, what you do is place your favorites in various places, and all this is resented. In fact, the army doesn't like it. The army top brass themselves don't like this lobbying for extensions. So that's the point at which there was some problem. But I think at this now, I have a feeling that I am pretty sure that Bajwa has his core commanders with him. It's not like last year. If there are cracks to develop, it will be only at a later stage if the more momentum is built up on the streets.
Thank you, Mr. Arni. I would like to shift our attention a bit from military to economy. Pranay, you had highlighted that there are economic problems. The Right now, the conditions laid down by IMF for the next chunk of the bailout package are not being met, and they are up for a review very soon. So, how considering the COVID crisis, where do you see this problem going? I agree that all the countries across in the world are facing problems, economic problems, but how is this adding up to Pakistan's problems that it is already having? One, and how would this instigate more protest going forward?
Right. I think that is really the key issue, because what you had earlier is that, see, as we have explained it earlier also, that Pakistan, we think of it as two geopolitical entities, right? One is this putative state, which is currently being headed by Imran Khan, but can be headed by someone else also in future. But there is what behind them is this military jihadi complex, which actually controls the levers of power over resources internally and over foreign policy as well, right? So now what has happened over the last few years is that the financial crunch is really hitting the military jihadi complex for a few reasons. One, the US, which was bankrolling a lot of the adventures of the MJC because of Afghanistan or other things, sort of that funding reduced, right? So from 2011 onwards, that has sort of decreased, and there are numbers to prove that. So coalition support funds dried down. A lot of the incoming funds which MJC could use for their own nefarious purposes sort of went down. That is one. Saudi Arabia itself also has been backing Pakistan in the past, but their own economic situation, they are trying to pivot their own economy, and they also realize Pakistan is giving problems. So there has been a shift in their attitude as well. So the two main sponsors of the MJC have gone down. Then came the idea of China becoming the main sponsor, right? That was the only only country which can sort of back them. But what has happened is with China also, the support is not the same as what it was with the US. Also, a lot of money which comes in are in the form of loans and not in the form of grants that Pakistan can and MJC can use whatever the way they can. They are tied to specific projects under CPEC, etc. Right? So that again constrains the MJC. Now, this is the intra-Pakistan relationship which is unfolding in the backdrop of a economy which is going down. Right? And now you look at the economic situation itself. There is also rising inflation. The exports had gone down over the last few years. So all those are coming together, and there is a contestation of garnering more resources at a time when the economy is falling. So you had this entire idea, just like we have the Finance Commission, Pakistan also has a Finance Commission, and there was this idea about sharing of resources between various states and the union government, and that's where again the military has been opposing a bigger share of funds going to the state provincial governments as well. So I think a lot of these things which are playing out have economy and the finance at its background. And in fact, if you again go to Nawaz Sharif's speech recently, he talks a lot about the economy and how that is being a big concern for Pakistan.
So these are two fascinating points, Pranay, especially the one where you mentioned the US pulling out and Saudi Arabia rerouting or repiloting its geopolitical aspects. I could think of one thing for some when Article 370 happened in India. Pakistan piloting around Turkey, which might have offended Saudi Arabia, Pakistan piloting for some cookie points and how it has costed them over the years. This is something that I could vaguely think of.
I just wanted to bring in a couple of things when you're talking on the economy. Do remember that Pakistan is facing an inflation which is now estimated around 11% over this last couple of months, the highest in the world. Then you have a looming food crisis because of the locusts and the COVID crisis. You have a food crisis. These are things that's going to muddy the waters for Imran. He has really no answers there. Apart from what you did discuss, that the need for external aid and where they're going to get it from. I don't see any sources of money coming from outside, even if the US is prepared to give it to them with the elections on and a new administration. Whoever administration it is, it will take them 6-8 months to get their people in place. So, and as you saw, the Saudis have really been upset. In fact, I would think that, in fact, this is an issue I will bring up as soon as I finish this. The Saudis are really very unhappy with Pakistan. They did not like this attempt to reboot the OIC, pivoted towards the non-Arab world, that is Turkey, Pakistan, and Malaysia. And so much so that they called back for their money, $1 billion. And also when Bajwa went there to try and mollify them, they didn't see Bajwa. But then again, I understand that the message has been passed on to the Saudis that aspect of they do not intend creating or not about to create a new bloc in the OIC. So I'm not sure how much that has mollified them. But let me say this much now here, that to do all this, have a jalsa of this sort, two already, one in Gujranwala and the other in Karachi, and to plan whatever you're planning requires a huge amount of money. Not that Nawaz can't afford it, but I wonder, it's in my mind whether this is some sort of an external stimulus has come in. You must remember that Nawaz is particularly close to the Saudis. So I wonder, it's just in my mind actually, whether there is a Saudi line in this whole thing. Anyway, that's about it. Yeah.
That's fascinating, Mr. Arni. I have one final question for both of you. Considering the volatility happening on the India's western neighborhood, what are quick takeaways for India from this? How can India be watchful regarding what is happening, and what are the impact if something goes wrong on India? Pranay, do you want to go first?
So, see, the impact on India is, again, I will look at it from an economic angle. As long as the MJC's financial options are constrained, it is not going to be able to do the big things, right? It is going to be looking inward and then try to do the same things it has been doing in the past about encouraging terrorism, about doing the small things that they keep engaging in. So that will sort of continue. Asymmetric options that they have been using will continue, but I don't see Pakistan being in a position to really, for example, ratchet up the tensions on the border to such a significant extent that there are broader confrontation. So that seems sort of unlikely, but there will be people in the MJC who will try to do the terrorism thing that they have been doing just to probably again reiterate to Pakistan and Pakistanis that military is still the ideological frontier? Is it the military is still the final protector for Pakistan? So those things might happen, and that's what India should be wary of, especially in J&K.
Mr. Arni?
Much of what Pranay said is, I'm not going to repeat it, but yes, they could be, we have to be on the guard. I know that the PDM has catered for some amount of the Islamic fervor by having Fazlur Rahman leading it, so that the army can't really use that. But there could be spoilers who try and muddy the waters, who create some problems, and those spoilers could operate across on our side of the border. So far, at least, Bajwa has shown no inclination to propel Pakistan in that direction, at least up to this point of his tenure. If he does get desperate, there's a whole new question there. And it's sometimes, very often, the easiest thing to do is to divert attention. And what better way of diverting attention than to divert it towards India? I believe, from what I understand, that their Jaish has been hobbled, or so they claim. The Pakistanis claim it. And the Lashkar is too busy in other theaters that is largely Afghanistan. But that just doesn't cater for some individuals up to creating problems. And let's see, I think we've got to be on our vigil. There are other things that will be done first if the army is pushed into a corner, not necessarily in the context of jihad or export of terrorism. You could have more firing on the borders. You could, I don't think you'll have any adventurism, but you'll have probably more firing. One thing that militates against anything happening in this direction is that we are fast approaching winter. So the window is very, very small for any adventurism of the nature that you have in terrorism or even of military operations.
Well, thank you. It was a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much, Mr. Arni. Thank you, Pranay, for joining us.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I also just wanted to ask everybody if they could go to the website ivmpodcast.com/survey and fill out a quick survey for us. It would be much appreciated. What a week we had this week. We had so much crossover, so many great guests. I don't even know where to start. Okay, yeah, I do know where to start. Let's start with Uncle Please Sit. Uncle Please Sit, Joel and Tushar had Hamsini Hariharan. Hamsini hosts a show called States of Anarchy with their network. She is a China expert, and they discussed the India-China relationship. Really fascinating conversation. Cyrus had 2 conversations this week instead of our normal Thursday Cock and Bull. Great conversations, both of them. We'll be back with our regular Cock and Bull next week. But this week, you could definitely check out the conversation he had with Varun Grover. Really fascinating stuff. And Nikhil Taneja, who was the founder of Yuva and the creative director for the India Film Project Festival, which is going on this weekend. He was on the show as well. Cyrus was also on Advertising is Dead this weekend with Varun Dugirala. Cyrus and Varun discussed Cyrus's intent on randomness. Ranveer Brar guested on Gauri Devi Dayal show. This rounds on me. Another amazing conversation over there. Priyanka Khimani, one of the best IP lawyers in this country, was on Storytellers and Storysellers for a fascinating conversation. Definitely do check that out. And finally, I wanted to congratulate Zarina Poonawala for her 100th episode. She had Ashish Vidyarthi as a guest on that. If you have not been listening to the Empowering series, please do. It's one of the great shows out there. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
Whether you're an established sports person or a budding one, or simply a sports enthusiast, join us, Tanvi and Shlok.
We are two passionate pro badminton players talking policy, mindset and everything sport.
So tune in to the Millennial Athlete every Monday.
Only on the IVM Podcast Network.
Trust us, it's gonna be lit.